the 4-hour rule. In the world of Japanese transport commentary, it's spoken about with this kind of reverence.
Oh, yeah. Like it's a physical constant.
Exactly, like the speed of light.
Right.
I recently saw this debate about expanding the Shinkansen to Sapporo, and it felt like a trial. This one critic just dismissed the whole multi-billion yen project with a smirk. He just said it's over 5 hours and leaned back like that was it, case closed.
As if that one number invalidates everything else.
To him and to so many people, that 4-hour mark isn't just a travel time. It's this invisible, impenetrable wall where rail just dies and air travel takes over.
It sounds so tidy, doesn't it?
It does. A perfect data-driven law. It's in every article. Everyone cites it. But when I started looking closer at the map, that ironclad rule began to look a lot more like, well, a convenient fiction.
Right.
Think about Hiroshima. The train is pushing right up against that 4-hour death zone, but the Shinkansen dominates. Then you look at Fukuoka, where the airport is tucked right into the city, and the whole thing gets messy.
The neat little rule falls apart pretty quickly.
That dismissal, that if it's over 4 hours, it's pointless idea, really made me wonder. We're so obsessed with this one metric that we ignore everything else.
We ignore the snowstorms that ground every flight to Hokkaido.
Or just the simple pain of getting to an airport that's on top of a mountain. We've turned a rough observation into a mental prison.
Yeah.
So today, we're going to look past that 4-hour wall and see what's really going on to understand how Japan actually moves.
And I think it's important to establish right away what this rule actually is.
Okay.
It is not a formal law. It's not written policy. It's an observation, like you said, a correlation from decades of data, specifically from when the Shinkansen was first starting out.
So it's an old guideline.
It's an experience-based guideline that has calcified into dogma. And the problem is, when we treat it as a universal law, we stop observing the messy reality of the system today.
You stop asking what else is driving this choice.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's unpack that. The tidy observation versus the messy reality. If this was a true ironclad law, rail market share should just evaporate at 4 hours and 1 minute.
It should fall off a cliff, but it doesn't. The data shows that the competition curve isn't just bent, it's often completely broken by local variables that the clock just ignores.
Right. So let's look at some of those examples.
Okay, let's take the clearest one first. Tokyo to Osaka. The Shinkansen is super fast, 2 hours and 22 minutes.
And the market share.
An absolutely dominant 85% for rail. No surprises there, it's well under the wall.
Right.
But then you look further south to Hiroshima. The journey time is 3 hours and 44 minutes. It's getting really close to that wall.
So that's the supposed death zone for rail competition. Logically, people should be flocking to the airport. And Hiroshima Airport is only, 40 to 60 minutes from the city?
It is. And yet the Shinkansen still captures a robust 67% of the combined market.
67%. So 2/3 of travelers are still choosing the train, even when the clock is ticking against them.
Because the convenience of the train station being right downtown, the low-stress experience, it just outweighs any marginal time savings you might get from flying.
So even just 15 minutes shy of the 4-hour mark, rail is still the top choice. But the variable that seems to really change the math isn't the travel time itself, it's the airport location.
The inconvenience factor. And Kanazawa is the textbook case for this.
Okay.
When the Hokkaido Shinkansen opened, connecting it to Tokyo, rail dominance just surged. The reason is that Komatsu Airport, which serves that area, is notoriously inconvenient.
That's a real trick to get to.
A significant and often unpredictable one. The Shinkansen just cut out all of that. It conquered the psychological distance, and crucially, it eliminated the worst part of air travel, the transfer.
And Fukuoka shows the exact opposite, right? It proves that convenience is king no matter what the 4-hour rule says.
Exactly. Tokyo to Fukuoka is where the rule seems to hold up. The train is 4 hours and 47 minutes, almost 5 hours.
Our rail market share plummets.
It crashes to only 10%. But what's the one massive difference there? Fukuoka Airport. It's basically part of downtown.
You can just hop on the subway and you're at the terminal in, 10 minutes.
That's the key. The friction involved in flying is almost zero. The total door-to-door stress time is dramatically reduced, so flying becomes disproportionately competitive.
The traveler looks at that nearly 5-hour train ride and thinks, okay, the hassle is low and I can save a solid 90 minutes of seated time.
Right. So if we step back, the 4-hour rule isn't really about 4 hours. It's a proxy for total door-to-door stress time. And the thing that moves that goalpost is always the airport's location.
The 4 hours on the train is perfectly acceptable if it means you get to skip 2 hours of queuing and waiting at some remote airport.
It's the difference between clock time and what you called stress time. The moment you factor in security, the chance of delays, the long transfers, the efficiency of flying just melts away.
And this is especially true in Japan, where the train is so reliable.
Absolutely. When the journey gets over 800 kilometers, okay, air wins. But below that, it's a real fight, and convenience often beats raw speed.
This analysis of where the rule bends brings us to where it breaks down completely. I'm talking about projects where the government is deliberately building lines that are 5 hours or longer.
Right. The motivation there clearly isn't commercial competition with airlines.
We're talking about the strategic expansion of the network. This has to be about something else, like national resilience.
Absolutely. We have to look at the Hokkaido Shinkansen extension to Sapporo.
The big one.
The journey time is estimated to be over 5 hours, so critics just use the 4-hour myth as a weapon to dismiss the whole thing. They say it's an economic failure before a single track is laid.
Because flying will always be faster.
But that's not the point. This project is a strategic investment in reliability and social trust. It's about prioritizing a robust land-based alternative over some short-term profit calculation.
This feels like a classic case of an investment that looks bad on a simple spreadsheet but holds enormous hidden value. The value of a backup.
Let's just visualize that value. Picture a bad winter evening at Nuchidos Airport in Hokkaido.
Okay.
A sudden, thick blanket of snow. The kind that grounds every single flight, maybe for days, or volcanic ash or a dense fog. Thousands of people are stranded instantly.
And that disruption isn't just personal, it's systemic. Suddenly, the local infrastructure, hotels, food, emergency services has to cope with an emergency population surge.
The economic and social cost of that kind of paralysis is immense. Aviation is fast when it works, but it's incredibly fragile. The Shinkansen, even if it takes 5 hours, is a promise.
A promise that the main link to the capital doesn't just snap when the weather turns bad.
It provides predictable, continuous connection. This isn't just about moving people, it's about maintaining a critical national artery.
And this principle of structural reliability was tested in the most extreme way imaginable during the 2011 Great East Japan earthquake.
A magnitude 9.0 event. You can't imagine a tougher test for a high-speed rail network.
I mean, that event is one of the most crucial proofs of concept for the Shinkansen's entire design philosophy. When that quake struck, there were 27 trains running on the Tohoku line.
And what saved them was the earthquake early warning system.
Can you explain quickly how that works? It's not just reactive.
It's anticipatory. The system has seismographs along the coast. It detects the first seismic waves, the faster, less destructive P waves, and uses those few critical seconds before the really damaging S waves arrive to take action.
So in 2011, that system triggered an automatic emergency stop on all 27 of those trains.
An immediate stop. And that margin, just a few seconds, allowed trains moving at immense speeds to start braking. The fact that it prevented a catastrophe during a magnitude 9.0 quake is just a testament to meticulous planning.
But it goes deeper than just the brakes, doesn't it? The response in 2011 was built on lessons from earlier disasters.
Oh, absolutely. It was a culmination of lessons from the 1995 Great Hanshin earthquake and the 2004 Midigata quake. Those events revealed weaknesses, and the engineers addressed them with incredible diligence.
What were some of those specific fixes, the small things that ended up saving lives?
Well, there were two major physical changes that were crucial. First, they added L-shaped guides to the wheels. These prevent the train from deviating too far sideways during a derailment.
Okay, so it helps keep it on the tracks.
And second, they implemented rail rollover prevention devices. These make sure that even if the ground moves and damages the rail fastenings, the wheels are still guided by the rails.
So they were designing the system not just to run fast, but to fail safely. That's a fascinating philosophy.
It is. And when the 2011 quake hit, these systems worked. Now, there was damage, of course. Around 1,200 sites had track or pole damage.
But not the kind of catastrophic collapse they saw in 1995.
Exactly. Earlier reinforcements prevented the viaducts from collapsing. The structure held.
This completely changes the context for that 5-hour Sapporo line, doesn't it?
Yeah.
When the government invests those billions, they aren't looking at a commercial spreadsheet. They're calculating the societal cost of a systemic failure.
It shows a core national commitment. National resilience is a form of social contract. It's proving that a reliable way home during a crisis is a fundamental human right, not just a logistical calculation for shareholder return.
The train is a geopolitical lifeline.
It is.
And that focus on the long-term social contract over short-term market metrics really shines a light on Western transport models, which are so often just profit-driven. This leads us right to the government philosophy that allows this kind of thinking to exist, the developmental state. It's about refusing to let the countryside just disappear.
This is where Japan's approach really challenges the prevailing neoliberal orthodoxy. The one that says infrastructure must be profitable quickly and should only serve high-density corridors.
Japan's strategy seems to be an elegant refusal of that idea.
It is. Think about a place like Kanazawa again, or any smaller town that got a Shinkansen connection without a slam-dunk business case.
Right. A Western economist might look at a town like that and talk about elegant decline.
Exactly. The cost-benefit analysis says the town isn't viable anymore, so its population should just move to Tokyo or Osaka. That traditional craft shop in Kanazawa gets written off as a relic.
But the Shinkansen brings more than just tourists. It brings stability.
It absolutely does. It conquers what we call the psychological distance to the capital. Young people often feel they have to leave their hometowns because they're cut off from the centers of commerce and culture.
But if you reduce that journey to a manageable, comfortable 3 hours,
it becomes viable for them to stay, to raise families, to contribute locally, while still having access to opportunities in the big city.
That's a profound policy choice. It's saying a country's strength is tied to its furthest, quietest platforms. To understand why Japan can do that, we have to talk about the developmental state framework, the D state.
Right. The D-state model, which scholars like Chalmers Johnson really popularized, describes a form of capitalism where the state has autonomous power and exerts far more strategic control over the economy.
And its main goal is explicit economic development. So this isn't just a regulatory state like we'd see in the US or Europe. What's the big functional difference?
Well, a regulatory state is mostly reactive. It sets standards, enforces rules, prevents market failures. It's basically a referee.
A passive role.
Mostly.
Yeah.
The developmental state, by contrast, is proactive. It doesn't just regulate, it actively promotes new industries, it directs investment, and it manages the disruptions that come with growth.
So they pursue long-term industrial policies instead of just letting the market lead.
Exactly. Historically, this was done through powerful bureaucracies, like the Ministry of International Trade and Industry, MITI.
Right.
MITI's bureaucrats guided the private sector. They made far-sighted decisions about what technologies and what infrastructure like the Shinkansen were necessary for Japan's future.
That sounds like a level of centralized control that runs counter to a lot of free market theory. Isn't there a risk of inefficiency or waste?
That's a really important question. And in theory, yes. But the success of the Japanese D-state came from the fact that its key bureaucratic elites were insulated. They were appointed, not elected.
So they weren't beholden to the short-term political cycle.
Precisely. They were less subject to corporate lobbying or the immediate demands of voters. This insulation allowed them to plan for the long term for investments that might not pay off for 20 or 30 years.
Like building a Shinkansen line to a less dense region like Sapporo.
They're optimizing for decades, not for the next fiscal quarter.
So the decision to fund a 5-hour line to Hokkaido isn't a failure of economic policy. It's a direct outcome of being a developmental state focused on long-term stability.
It shifts the whole conversation from, is this profitable, to, is this structurally necessary for the nation? But beyond policy, there's one last piece of the puzzle that the numbers always miss.
The human factor, the individual traveler's choice. We established that on a long journey like Tokyo to Hakata, the 4-hour rule says you should fly. But a lot of people don't. They're actively choosing the longer train ride.
And that persistence of rail, even on that long route, really highlights the value people place on the quality of the journey. Why pick a nearly 5-hour train over a flight that saves an hour?
The answer has to be about psychological comfort and predictability.
It's what you called a quiet rebellion against the chaos of modern air travel. Let's just think about what that chaos looks like.
The security line, taking off your shoes, the delayed boarding, the cramped seat.
The constant pings, the turbulence, the long trek from a remote airport. It's a series of stressful, disconnected steps where you feel completely out of control.
Whereas the Shinkansen is the polar opposite. It's predictable, disciplined order.
It's a ritual of precision. I mean, think about the details. The doors opening with like 12-second accuracy.
The lack of turbulence. It's basically vibration-free at 300 kilometers per hour.
The quiet atmosphere in the car. Being able to spread out your work, watch the landscape glide by, and enjoy a high-quality Ekaben lunch in peace. The traveler is respected.
This flips the whole idea of efficiency on its head. We're obsessed with time saved, but it seems the Japanese traveler is prioritizing time experienced.
The comfort, the peace of mind, the guaranteed predictability. They're choosing a superior journey quality over pure speed.
It's an interesting philosophical divide. In the West, time is money. Shortest time wins.
In Japan, time is quality. And the most productive, peaceful, and predictable time often wins. Even if it's longer, if that time is usable and stress-free, it's seen as more efficient.
And this cultural preference helps explain the resistance to high-speed rail elsewhere, like in North America, where the arguments are always about cost or the freedom of driving.
Exactly. Critics focus on the marginal savings of speed or the construction cost. They miss the key insight from Japan, that if the rail product is good enough, it can fundamentally change how people travel.
Are there clear examples outside of Japan where high-quality rail just killed air routes?
Absolutely. The Taiwan high-speed rail is a perfect case study. It was based heavily on the Japanese model.
Okay.
Once it was finished, it offered this reliable, high-quality city center to city center option. By 2012, China Airlines had completely canceled all its flights between Taipei and Kaohsiung.
The market just shifted.
The market responded rationally. Why deal with the airport hassle when a superior stress-free alternative exists?
It shows the real competitor isn't a faster train, it's just a better journey. But sustaining that level of quality, especially on long routes, must require a really unique financial model.
And this brings us to maybe the most fascinating part of the whole story: how they pay for it all.
Because globally, public rail is a money pit. It's all about subsidies and deficit.
Right. But Japan operates on a completely different framework. And we can see this through the fare box ratio.
The fare box ratio, that's just the percentage of operating costs covered by passenger tickets, right?
Exactly. And back in the 80s and 90s, if you looked at, say, London or Paris, their systems were heavily subsidized. London's ratio was around 78 to 84%. Paris was sometimes as low as 43%.
So public money was covering more than half the cost. That's what we expect from public transit.
Now look at the Japanese private railway operators. Companies like OMTB, TRTA, Hankyu. They consistently had fare box ratios exceeding 100%, often between 120 and 170%.
Wait, 170%? So they're making massive profits from ticket sales alone before even dealing with debt.
That's right. It is globally unprecedented for large-scale public transport. And it's because they operate under this self-supporting principle.
The idea that public transport should pay for itself, the user pays.
Right, which forces a commercial, self-reliant approach.
Yeah.
It incentivizes high quality because the operators depend entirely on market demand.
But if they have to serve less populated areas, how do they generate that kind of revenue without government handouts? This must be where the diversification comes in.
It's an ingenious model born from history. After the 1906 Railway Nationalization Law, private railways couldn't compete on the main government lines. So they had to build routes in areas with smaller populations.
They couldn't just serve demand, they had to create it.
They had to generate their own ridership. So they became developers, not just transport companies.
Okay.
The private railway business model has 4 integrated divisions: rail, other transport like buses and taxis, real estate and other businesses, department stores, amusement parks, stadiums.
And the key is that this diversification isn't random. It's all aimed at one thing.
Increasing rail ridership. Precisely. Yep. They build high-density housing and commercial properties along their lines. They put a department store right on top of their main terminal.
They build a theme park at the end of the line to give people a reason to ride the train.
They internalize the benefits of the infrastructure they create. The increased land value is captured by the rail company itself. It's a virtuous economic circle.
So the rail line makes the real estate profitable, and the real estate profits sustain the core rail business.
And you can see this in the financial breakdown, especially for the smaller operators. Data from the mid-90s showed only 38% of their revenue came from rail itself.
Wow.
A huge 32% came from other transport, and 30% from real estate and other businesses. The non-rail profits are explicitly designed to subsidize the core rail service.
That completely changes the investment calculation for a line to Sapporo. Even if it won't compete on speed, the model assumes the investment will eventually create enough commercial activity to sustain itself.
Right.
But does the government offer any support? Are there hidden subsidies?
For the major private railways, operational subsidies are almost non-existent. They are self-sufficient. Subsidies do exist for major infrastructure creation, though.
So for a big public project like a new subway line,
the government might cover up to 70% of the construction cost. But that's a crucial distinction.
They reduce the upfront capital cost, but they don't cover operating losses or ongoing debt.
Exactly. They lower the barrier to entry, but the operator still has to make the service self-sustaining through that aggressive diversification. It forces them to maintain the highest service levels because they depend entirely on market demand.
We started this deep dive with a huge project being dismissed because of one number, 4 hours. But looking past that wall reveals this multi-layered strategic identity.
The 4-hour rule is a massive simplification. It completely ignores Japan's commitment to resilience, to regional equity, and a deep cultural preference for order and quality.
The decisions aren't about maximizing speed, but about optimizing for social stability.
And the financial success of it all, even on marginal routes, is tied directly to that long-term, rail-centric diversification model that the developmental state encouraged. They build the market around the track.
It demonstrates that these infrastructure decisions are really moral and strategic choices, not just logistical calculations. They prioritize human resilience and the dignity of regional life over pure speed.
Which shows us that these common-sense metrics, obsessed only with the clock, can completely fail to capture the true multidimensional value of a well-designed, nationally committed system.